Hey everyone, it's Kim Bowen with The Marriage Place. I am back with another Kim Chats with, and today my guest is Sam John, and I am so excited to have Sam on today because Sam is actually one of my team members, one of my employees at The Marriage Place, and probably one of my favorite people in the whole world. So hello, Sam.
Hey Kim, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for jumping on today.
No worries. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, Sam is an LPC, and he, like most of my team members, specializes in relationships and couples, marriages, that kind of thing. But Sam also has a strong interest in working with people with anxiety. And so when we have a highly anxious client, we'll often refer over to Sam. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, I know, but I want you to share a little bit about why anxiety interests you.
Yeah, good question. So, a lot of it for me started as a kid, right? What I have learned in studying anxiety, a lot of times it stems from your childhood. Things that you've experienced, traumatic experiences, childhood experiences. Like for me specifically, it was growing up in a household where my dad could be very hypercritical.
Mm,
And it was something that I experienced from as a little kid all the way till, shoot, it was even into my 20s, right? And he always set really high expectations for me. And I always sought and needed his approval and his love. And when I wasn't getting it, it just created this uncertainty inside of me. And I remember even as a little kid, I would always be nervous about taking exams because my thought process is, what if I don't do well? What if
right.
I don't get the grade that my dad wants? Or what if I don't perform well in my sports? What if my dad's not happy? What if I don't make him proud? And so that kind of a thought process started for me as early as I remember like 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
And so, and that continued, like, right? That continued into my young adulthood. And when I started to get into relationships, and it played into that as well, I would always want to make sure that the other person was happy, and that created the pleaser in me. And that pleaser was always just anxious.
Hmm.
Just always nervous about, am I going to make that person happy? And, it played into all aspects of my life. And so when I started to go get my master's in counseling, that was one of the reasons why I was so interested in counseling, was because when I was doing my own individual work, I started to do some work around anxiety. And what I learned from my individual work really inspired me to want to do the same thing for others. And so when I got my master's, one of the things that I wanted to always do was get a better and better feel for anxiety. What does it look like? What are some tools? And how can I help people that are struggling with anxiety as well? And so, like when I get clients that walk in through the doors and sit on that couch in front of me, and they are struggling with anxiety and or depression, my heart goes out to them, because I really do get what they're going through. I get what they're feeling, because I was once upon a time there. So that's one of the reasons why I love that topic of anxiety.
So you feel like for you personally, your healing or your recovery has been pretty successful as far as, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, right? For anybody who has anxiety. It's not like you're cured.
Yeah, exactly. So it's never cured, right? But I've gotten to where in my life it's much more manageable. And that's what it's all about. And that's what life is really all about, is just being able to manage circumstances, situations, events, and process them properly and differently the way we used to do. That makes you a more of a functional adult, so that you can really adult life well, and conquer some of the struggles that you face and the fears. And that's what anxiety is really, to me, it's conquering the thought process that creates this fear response inside of us.
Okay, so I love that because you said, I mean, anxiety, I think it's a tough topic. I think it's kind of like depression. You can't go and have a blood test and or a brain scan even yet. I mean, hopefully someday where they can say, "Oh yeah, this is what you have." And especially like anxiety, there's all kinds of different kinds. of anxiety. And so I've got a son who struggles with OCD. And I have had generalized anxiety disorder most of my life, and so it's a thing. I mean, Americans are, well, all over the world, people are suffering with anxiety.
Correct. There's a lot of people that struggle with it. I mean, I was looking up some research a year ago on this topic, and we have 40 million people that struggle with anxiety that are diagnosed each and every year with some form of anxiety disorder, right? And there's 320 million roughly people in the US. That's 13%. Right? 13%, you would think, hey, it's not that bad. But when you take that 13% of the total population, that's 40 million people each and every year that's getting diagnosed with some sort of disorder regarding anxiety. And that's a big, big number if you really think about that. And I happen to be one of those people that fall into that category in the past. And even in 2017, another research that I saw was that Barnes and Noble saw a 25% sales uptick in anxiety books, right? More and more people were ordering and looking into how can I manage, how can I deal, how can I get over, how can I heal myself of these thoughts that just consume me, and this tension inside of me, this angst inside of me. And I was once upon a time there as well, because I used to get books on it. And I see a lot of people that will do that same kind of a thing. But a lot of people struggle with anxiety, right? And so we have to kind of determine what's normal and what's quote unquote abnormal, right? And so everybody struggles with some anxious thoughts, right? When we're getting ready to take an exam. When we get pulled over getting a speeding ticket, there's this anxiousness that takes place of the red lights in the rearview mirror, public speaking. Heck, even right now, and I told you this prior to even getting on here, I was anxious about this, right? And so, but those are normal, right? Those are moments that takes place here and there in our lives, but it's not all consuming. It's not consistent. When it becomes a problem is when it's a persistent behavior and is uncontrollable, and it becomes overwhelming, and it makes us disabled in the ability to live life to the fullest. And that happens on a day-to-day basis. And the DSM-5 basically says any kind of the anxiety disorders, if it's persistent for about 6 months or so, it's an actual disorder. You can get diagnosed with some form of anxiety. And so a lot of people tend to struggle with anxiety, but a lot of people can be diagnosed with it, whether it's general anxiety, OCD, like you were talking about. Heck, for a while, I thought it was social anxiety disorder. Just
I
being
still
around
think
people.
you might be.
I may be.
Yeah. Hey, Sam, you want to go? No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm skipping. Thanks. But yeah, so I may be. That's probably one diagnosis I just don't want to really come to terms with. But PTSD, that's another form of anxiety. A lot of people struggle with that, and we tend to think PTSD is related to military people or people who are in the line of fire of some kind. But the PTSD can show up in different ways, right? Childhood stuff, being even raped, any kind of a traumatic moment in a relationship can create PTSD.
We know that if a client has an affair, the spouse who was cheated on can have very severe PTSD symptoms.
Correct. And that's something that we see a lot, right? In our sessions with our clients, people who have struggled with affairs. It's, and I see this a lot and I hear it a lot is, Sam, every time I pass by this hotel, or every time I hear this song, or every time I turn on the TV and I watch this movie and there's a scene where this guy was cheating on this woman, that reminds me of what I was going through. And you can, as they're sharing those moments and those stories, you can feel the energy of that angst inside of them. And you can hear the pacing in their voice, and you can feel the emotions starting to rise, and they have a hard time being able to just control the thoughts of, this is what he did, this is what she did, I can't believe she did that, or he did that. And it just becomes this overwhelming, uncontrollable, persistent thought process that takes place over and over and over. And it
Yeah, and
just,
it does. It kind of hijacks your brain. It's almost like you just can't. What's the joke? It's like, Sam, don't think about an elephant, and then what are you going to be thinking about?
the elephant.
The elephant. And so it just anxiety. It's miserable. It is miserable.
Mm-hmm.
It hijacks your brain, and none of the things you tell yourself as logic, you know, can sometimes bring you back. It's just it hijacks. That's the only thing I can think of. But
Yeah,
you said,
exactly.
and you said earlier, like 13% of the people are diagnosed. And I'm wondering how many are not diagnosed.
Correct. That's just the reported number.
How many times have you had a couple in your office? I know I have had lots where anxiety was part of what was playing out in the relationship, and they were shocked to find out that that was anxiety.
Oh yeah, I would say it's 80%, if not
Yeah,
even higher.
at least.
At least,
So
and
when you've got a client who's a controller, that's
correct.
really anxiety.
Oh yeah, I mean, you in our practice we talk about the 5 love styles for the how we love, right? It's the pleaser, the avoider, the controller, the vacillator, and the victim, right? In any one of those 5 personality types, there's anxiety. It's
Yeah.
what keeps them in the pleaser role. It's what keeps them avoidant. It's what keeps them vacillating back and forth. It's the thing that keeps them wanting to control the event and the situation in their spouse, right? It's the inability to control their thoughts, their feelings, and their behaviors. It's also what we at the marriage place, we really believe in differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to manage your own self, be responsible for yourself, and being able to give someone else that ability to speak their truth to you and hear their truth and be able to be responsible for your own feelings and your thought process when they are sharing their truth to you.
And it's our anxiety that can sometimes, take over and
Absolutely.
tank a good interact or what could be a positive interaction into something negative.
Correct. And that's what the trap of anxiety is that we take a moment that is uncomfortable for us, but we treat it like it's an actual dangerous moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what triggers the fight, flight, freeze response. It's an uncomfortable situation in reality, but our brain has learned to create it or treat it like it's a dangerous situation. And so now I have to either fight you in this moment, or I have to run away from you, or I just freeze up in this moment and do absolutely nothing and pretend like I'm almost dead and just check out, dissociate. And so those are the kinds of responses that we have. And a lot of the trap that we fall in with the anxiety is and I see this a lot with my clients, and I did the same thing as well, is we would sit there and we'll ask ourselves, but what if this happens? But what if this happens? But what if this happens? And then we go down that trail of painting this picture. And one of the things that I tell my clients is when we're doing that, what we're really saying to ourselves when we ask the question, what if, it's what we're really saying is, let's pretend. Let's pretend this alter reality. Let's pretend this really horrific, damaging, scary event is taking place, and let's put ourselves into that moment. And that's what happens with anxiety, is that it's a fear response. And one of the things I tell my clients is the acronym that I've heard about for fear is false expectations appearing real. And that's what fear is we take an event that we think is going to happen into the future, and we pretend like it's happening, and we feel those emotions, those raw emotions in that future state, and we bring it into the present moment, and now we're getting triggered.
Right. So I'm thinking about, all the different types of anxiety and how it's treated. And depending on who you go to, I mean, if you go see a psychiatrist or a medical doctor and you tell them you have anxiety, one of the first things they do is pull out a prescription pad. And there's all kinds of benzo meds that are highly addictive. Ativan, Xanax, Klonopin, those kinds of things. And I'm reading more and more lately. I'm wondering if you are too, about how bad those are for you. And, for your brain function, for your memory, and again, of course, the addiction element to that.
Yeah, like, so here's my take on medication. As a therapist, that's not the first thing that I go to. I want to try and help my clients build skills. And if the client can manage their life using these skills and their anxiety level is not extremely high, then let's use the skills. But there are times when I feel like we do need to be able to incorporate some form of medication, especially when they are just not able to manage themselves even with the skills. So sometimes the medication is important. But you're right. The more and more I have kind of talked to clients that have or that are on the medication in some way, or read reports or studies, and I've got to some of these CE classes, and they even say that sometimes when they are dealing with clients that have anxiety, they will actually take them off the medication specifically to do some treatment. And then to see, because they don't know if the medication that they're on is dulling their ability to really feel certain things so that they can really learn to manage those skills better.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so they had to take them off the medication.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I agree. And I think medication for the most part should be short term, but I mean, I've definitely been on my share of anxiety medication over the years. And where I think we need to put some focus on, I do believe that there's some people whose brains are wired to be more anxious than others. OCD runs in my family. I mean, you can see it skip through the generations, and I think a lot of the times that's hereditary. It's a biological component to that. But I also know that for many people, there is, like you said, an event, a childhood event, ACE scores, adverse childhood events, and childhood trauma. And so I think people are scared of that word trauma. I think that a lot of people hear about childhood trauma and they want to say, well, my parents did the best they could, or I don't want to, don't want to do anything that's going to make my parents feel bad or look bad, or, and we know that that's not, it doesn't even have to be something severe like your parent beat you or sexually molested you, or, it's just, it could be a parent who's worked a lot and had to work a lot.
Correct.
And you spent too much time alone, or there was some neglect, that a parent, I had one client, his mother was dying of cancer, and for heaven's sakes, it wasn't her fault, but he still was in the environment where all the attention and focus was on a sick mom and not a kid. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, as you know, I lead that Breaking Free workshop for childhood trauma. And the stories that I have heard over the last 4 years, it reinforces how things that happen in those early formidable years can create the brain to react in certain ways. And so, yeah, I completely agree. I've heard stories where clients, when they were children, they would take care of a mom or dad that was struggling with depression. And so they would see the heaviness in their mom or in their dad, and they would see mom going into the room and just laying in bed for hours upon hours. And I have a story of, I remember one of the clients, she would sit at the door frame of her mom's bedroom and just sing her a song while the door was closed, because she thought that singing that song for mom would be a great way to comfort her, to love her. And so even as a little girl, she was always just really nervous when anybody showed signs of sadness. She got anxious. So when she got into a relationship, she got into a marriage where her husband was sad sometimes. And so she would go to this place of just feeling really a lot of angst inside of her, tension inside of her, because her husband's sad. And she didn't know how to deal with that. She didn't allow him to be able to feel the emotions of sadness because she thought that that was not good, that he couldn't handle it. And so she took on that responsibility, that burden. And because she took on that burden herself, she's just she's trying to figure out, how do I fix this? How do I do this? How do I make him feel better? And just those kinds of thoughts just can be so overwhelming to an individual.
That Breaking Free workshop that you lead for us, I have never sent a client through that didn't come back and say that that was a life-changing weekend or week. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the Breaking Free workshop?
Yeah, so look, I love that workshop. If out of everything that I do at the marriage place,
I
that is the one thing that I love the most because it resonates so much with me, right? So the Breaking Free workshop, it's a 3-day intensive, and it is intense, right? But I love the workshop because there's strangers that come into this workshop. There's a lot of angst inside of them. There's a lot of anxiousness inside of them. They're all thinking, looking at themselves like, oh crap, I got to talk about all of my stuff with you and you and you and this guy that I
They
don't even
always
know.
say that. They're like, I'm not getting in a group and talking about my stuff.
Exactly, exactly. And so there is this angst inside of them. There's this nervousness, and but by day 2 and day 3 especially, they are so comfortable. It's still hard work. It's still difficult, but they're so much more relaxed. They've gotten to know the people a lot better. They've
Mm.
gotten to know me better because in the workshop I share a lot of my own past history and my own childhood, because one of the things that I'm a firm believer in, if you really want to be able to help people, you have to share a piece of yourself. And so that's what I do throughout that workshop is I share a lot of my own history, about a lot of my own past examples, just to let them know that one, I get it. Like I completely get where you're coming from. And two, to let them know that this is what it looks like. This is how trauma can look like, even if it's not the abuse or sexual abuse or physical abuse, but even if your father is critical with you over and over and over, how that can play out into your childhood and then in your adulthood. And we talk about what is trauma. We talk about how does that impact you as a child? How does that impact you as an adult? We talk about how do you set boundaries, right? Internal boundaries, external boundaries. We talk about self-esteem. How do you look at yourself, and what is the appropriate way to manage your own view of your own self, your own identity? It goes along with a lot of what we talk about with differentiation as well. And then we talk about our sense of being able to take care of ourselves, self-care, meeting our needs and our wants appropriately and in a healthy manner, and not going out there and doing it in a way that creates more problems in our lives.
Right.
And then we also talk about moderation. How do we find more balance in our life, given everything that we've gone through? It's an awesome workshop. It's a great time. It's hard work, but by the time people leave the workshop, I'm telling you, people have a hard time leaving because they feel so close to the entire group. It's
Yeah,
almost like a family atmosphere.
I know it is. And like I said, I've never seen anybody through it that didn't just say it was life changing, which is, I mean, pretty amazing recommendation there. Um, what do you think clients want to know about anxiety and whether or not they need to come for help? What do you think would be how am I going to know it's time to get some help?
So look, for me, the way I knew I needed to get some help with my own anxiety is when I knew that I was not able to get through the days. Like if I was constantly ruminating on something and I was not able to focus my attention on work, or focus my attention at home, or focus my attention with my wife or with the kids or whoever it might have been, and my thought process was pulling me away from just the everyday routines.
Right.
That was one of the signs that I knew I have got to figure this thing out. I've got to go talk to somebody who knows what this is all about and how I can learn some skills on how to deal with a lot of this. Something else, another indicator or a good sign for people to come in and talk about this is if you are feeling just really physically just worn out, if you are angry a lot, if there's a part of you that is just not the best version of you, is always coming out in some way or another, whether it's low, where it's sad, depressed, or if it's high, where you're just highly irritable, super reactive to people, and you're not just your balanced state of you, I would also encourage you to come in and seek help and attention to get that help, to get that remedied. Because you don't want to live like that. It's just not the best version of you. It's not going to bring the joy in life for you. You may experience happiness in moments, but those are few and far between. Finding true joy is going to be really, really difficult when when you're struggling with anxiety. Trust me, that's where I used to be.
Yeah. And a lot of people who are trying to avoid feeling anxious are numbing themselves out with other things, right?
Yep.
So the drug addicts and the alcoholics and the sex addicts and the food addicts and,
The gamers.
the gamer. Oh my gosh, that's such a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a problem. And so it's just not knowing how to deal with our own anxious thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, porn is one of those things that people will go to to deal with anxiety. For me specifically, when I used to deal with high amounts of anxiousness, is I would just zone out in front of a TV.
Yeah, me too. I've done that too.
Yep.
And
For
right now
hours.
we're all binge watching because we have no control over this world we're in right now.
Correct. And my wife used to tell me, "Are you really going to sit there in front of that TV? It's been 4 hours." And I'm thinking to myself, it's only been like a couple of hours or so. When I never realized I was in front of a TV for like 4 hours. And so, but that's how we need to just calm the brain.
Right.
So we're always looking for something external something to help us just to slow down and just.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you still do EMDR?
I do. But I do a lot more. What I do now is tapping. I've found that to be really helpful and effective for a lot of my clients that struggle with anxiety and some of my clients that struggle with depression too. I actually enjoy that. It's something that my clients can easily do without me around. And that's why I think that's just as effective, or for me specifically, just in my opinion, my clients have really liked that a lot.
Okay, good. You ever gotten to tell the client to get a weighted blanket?
I do. My wife actually has one.
Do you like it?
Me personally, no, right? Because I get hot. But
Yeah.
there's those weighted blankets that actually the material that they use helps you to not feel as hot.
Not feel as hot.
Yeah, exactly. But my wife, she uses it and she loves it. And I have recommended that to a few of my clients that struggle with anxiety, and they love that as well. I've got 4 clients that actually use the weighted blankets, and they report that it helps them to feel calm at night, and they sleep better with the weighted blanket.
Okay. Well, yeah. Like being hugged all night, I guess. Right?
It is. It's that feeling of just feeling like somebody's just hugging you, and it's just like this. It's not overwhelmingly heavy. I think the weight is like 10% of your weight, and so it's 10, 12 pounds on top of you, and it's just like feeling like you're being wrapped around by a hug. And that's one of the reasons for why it releases all the positive chemicals at night to allow you to sleep better.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into some of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you can get different weights, 10,
correct,
15, whatever, 12.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sam, is there anything else you want to share with us about anxiety or what
all I want to say about that is if you are struggling, I highly recommend just coming and getting the help. I know anyone here at the Marriage Place would love to help. I would love to help anybody that's struggling with anxiety. I get what you're going through. I understand that. Don't just think that you can manage it. Don't think that you can just fight through those thoughts and just stop it. And because the harder you work at trying to stop the thoughts, the more intense the thoughts become. And so a lot of this really is learn to accept the thoughts rather than fight against it. Because the harder you fight against it, the more you're going to fall into the pit. And so if you are struggling with any of those kinds of ruminating thoughts, the body tension, just feeling just like the world just going to come to an end, or everything is happening to me and I just have no say in what happens in life. Come get help, right? We want to help you. We want to do whatever we can to get you to a better place and help you start to live the life that you were really meant to and called to live.
Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate that. And for the rest of you out there, listen, if you or somebody you love is struggling with a painful past, um, things that they're having trouble getting over, and you feel like they're stuck in it, look up on our website about the Breaking Free workshop and get on the list, because it really is a powerful workshop, and it's based on Pia Melody's work from the Meadows. It's good stuff. So, all right, Sam, thanks for joining us today. And all of you out there, thank you for clicking and tuning in. And if you want more information about Sam and his work or The Marriage Place, go to our website, themarriageplace.com. All right, guys, I'll